All right, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining in. I know it's a tough time to be right in between lunch, but I'll try and do justice to it. There's no PowerPoint slides, so should be a little bit more fun. I really love the topic because I think that's the sentiment of the day, right? In terms of how do you think of scaling whatever you're really building. And this room, I'm assuming, is full of entrepreneurs, who are in that boat, if I may, in terms of just disrupting opportunities both in the domestic and the global market. And before we get started, I'd like to do a quick poll just to gauge the persona in the room here. How many of you are entrepreneurs with companies less than 3 years of age? Between 0 to 3 years, show of hands. All right, maybe about 10%. Between 3 and 5 years? 5 to 10? 10 plus? All right, so I could get to about 40%, so I don't know who are the other 60. All right, wonderful. So let's start with that. Now that we understand the mix in the room, right? Maybe I'll start with you, Gaurav, because you've been in that ecosystem for a while now. When you think of the word scale, right? What's your first impression of it? What do you think of? What are the segments in which you think of scale, really?
Okay. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, good afternoon, tremendous audience, all the founders in the audience. So I think, for me, scale is synonymous with growth. I think that's what I would normally, at least at a startup level, define it as. And again, scale can be scale at for any metric that makes sense for you as a business. So it can be scale of your business, your sales. It can be scale of your page views. It can be your downloads. It can be your customers, paying customers. Whatever you think is a good metric that you would like to identify as a growth metric for your company, I would like to associate scale specifically with that number, because that's the only number I think that makes sense.
Right. I think the interesting analogy here is, if you look at India, has always been a land of entrepreneurs, Niraj, right? We have about 50 million small businesses which are there doing all kinds of businesses in the country, right? Historically, many of them have really never cared about scale, right? They've all lived a lifestyle which is very kind of stagnated in terms of growth. They just work with the same customers. They just do the same stuff. They thrive, right? When you think of scale, and in this context of technology, etc., why is it so important in today's construct? Why should entrepreneurs really care about scaling?
I think it's an interesting question, and I would say you're good the way you are. But seriously, I think tech is really giving you that opportunity to forget about scale, right? If you look at the marginal cost of adding scale as a result of tech, it's almost near zero, right? I mean, if you purpose built yourself to be digitally native, you've got those building blocks, you've already, just adding numbers to what you have is pretty much very simple, right? So I kind of have this great analogy where I say, hey, you know what? If you're thinking about building a 40-story building, you got to have the foundation which actually supports those 40 stories. Now that's going to be cost effective for you. So scale doesn't matter, as long as you got the foundation. Adding more floors to it doesn't really matter. What would matter is, if you don't have the foundation, then you got to look for real estate. And then the cost of adding that real estate and remodeling the entire architecture becomes so difficult. So I think scale today doesn't matter. Tech kind of allows you to really, provides you that scale at marginal cost, at zero marginal cost.
So now, that's true. And I think, Ravi, given the fact that you have been a veteran in the tech industry, you've seen the role of tech in terms of scaling, and the fact that the marginal cost of scaling reduces dramatically on the back of tech. What do you think is then not scaling, right? So if the companies, how would you determine that a company is not really scaling, right? Because investing in tech is kind of taken care of. Investing in tech is already taking care of scaling, etc. what doesn't qualify as scale as companies think about building their businesses?
Tough to,
I think it's working.
yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Great, okay. So tough to answer a question that's framed in the negative, but let me try. Also, just to give you all a little bit context, just so you have the sense for the anchor from where I talk, right? NetApp's a cloud-led software company focusing on data management. So you might see me gravitate towards data, bear that in mind.
Sure.
But I'll tell you this, we run our own accelerator. We've been doing it for about 5 years. And I think the number one theme that comes up with founders is that it is true, if you've been doing anything in tech or in startups over the last 6 or 7 years, you don't worry about technology infrastructure, because the cost of developing software is continuing to go down. It's not just that it's going down to zero, even more complex software is going to get built with very low investment. Not true if you were doing it 15 years ago. You'd be building a data center, you'd be acquiring money to sit in somebody's data center before
Correct.
you did anything. And a lot of us have built businesses on that, right? But I think what we see among our founders is what they are doing in the first few years is very rapid pivots. Forget years, maybe even months. Very rapid pivots. You come in thinking you're going to be in business X, your value to the customer is something, you talk to a few people, you find out you need to change. Now the threat in there is that if you've anchored in an architecture, right, what Niraj was calling foundation, in our world is architecture. So if you've anchored on an architecture that's locked you in or doesn't allow you to be agile or forces you into a methodology, you're really stuck. So I think the number one, focus on your customer, focus on the value you want to provide, focus on the business you're trying to build, and just understand that get there very fast.
Yeah.
Just don't make critical mistakes that get you stuck.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly interesting point. And given the mix of the audience we have here, which are, entrepreneurs have been they've just started, or entrepreneurs have gone through 1 or 2 cycles of evolution. Gaurav, in your view of the world, does the definition of scale really change depending on the life cycle or life stage you are as an entrepreneur? Like, you've done this for 7, 8 years. If you go back in your time when you were just starting versus where you are today, would you have any advice for our audience in terms of how could one think of scale in different ways at different points in the journey and the evolution?
Yeah, so good question. I think one of the things that I have seen, a lot of founders tend to make that mistake of, just not thinking over scale is good, but obsessing over scale perhaps is a big problem that I've seen at times. Because when people start a company, they would straight away start thinking of 10 million users, okay? But the journey has to start from 1 to go to 100, and then go to 1,000, and then maybe a 10,000, and then a million. So the strategies keep changing. It's not one size or one strategy that goes from 0 to 10 million. Every time you are hitting one milestone in the company, everything will change. Your strategy will change, your org structure will change, your finances will change, your funding will change, everything will change. So I think the strategy has to keep moving from milestone to milestone. I think that is one of the realizations that I have seen. Founders, always tend to see a very, very big, very, very large, very broad vision, but they sometimes need to also then start thinking about these chunks that they have to cross before they reach that ideal goal or that ideal business objective that they started out with.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Niraj, you've been in a little bit of a different part of the tech industry, more established companies, cross-cultural companies and all of that. And in that part of the world, we've really seen that there are 2 types of people, right? There are technologists and then there are sellers, right? And technologists obsess very deeply on product capabilities, platform capabilities. Even if the market acceptability may or may not be there, but they are very passionate in terms of building the core tech, right? And on the other side, sellers are the ones who can pretty much sell anything, and they thrive on that, right? In a construct like that of a startup, right, I'm assuming both of them becomes, foundationally important. What are the observations you have made in your career looking at startups versus larger companies? How does the definition of scale really differ in these 2 constructs?
So, I think if there's one thing that's really important to incubate a startup, it's customer experience. How can I entice the customer to try out my products and service and really model that in the behavior of the client? Right. So if the client's got to really stretch out and it's a different activity for him to actually use the product or service, it's not going to make an impact to his life. I mean, if you look at all the success stories that we've had, whether it's Paytm, which really modeled the mechanism in which you pay for change, right? Or if you look at Uber, or if you look at any of these, one thing that's really in common is customer experience. The second thing I think, coming back to your technology question, the second thing that I think is really, really important when we scale up technology is really reusability. A lot of our infrastructures are built, to be siloed, to be very rigid, and we kind of get bound by that infrastructure rather than being bound by business.
Right.
So I think that becomes really important. How can I be more modular? How can we be really reusable while focusing on customer experience? And I'll just add one more point to it. I think there was a conversation on ecosystems. The world's moving towards collaboration.
Right.
And the only way that you can be successful as a startup business, in my view, is building that collaborative ecosystem, which really gives you the network effect to win more and more users and customers.
Right.
So that, in my view, is very, very important as well.
Yeah. And I think as a management consultant, I get the opportunity to talk to many startups in different constructs. And, one of the things, Ravi, that I constantly observe is that, and specifically true in the 1 to 10 million journey, is the fact that a lot of the startups struggle to, become very deep tech companies, right? So they are maybe a little bit more wider in their portfolio and approach versus very deep in certain construct. They also get, as we're talking scale, right? They also get bogged down a little bit by customer expectations, like Niraj is saying. You want to deliver exceptional customer experience, but that invariably means that you have to detour from building products to actually deploying and making sure that the product works, right? And I have observed through conversation that kind of scenario really makes the startup struggle for scale because they are too locked in with one or two customers, only focusing on professional services, not really able to build products and platforms. How do you think of those scenarios, in terms of trade-offs between exceptional customer experience versus scaling the platform?
So you said a few things. I'll just clarify one. Even 4 years ago, when I looked at some of our startup accelerator participants, there was that very real risk. They were going very deep into satisfying a few small customers or a few large customers.
Right.
And what ends up happening is then you become a services company. I think we are way past that. I don't think you see that now, right? But I do think that a lot of us still start from a very tech foundation, thinking that technology is kind of key to our success. It is key to our success, but as we've talked about multiple times now, it's almost free. Right? And what do I mean by free? It's not like you don't pay for quality software, quality infrastructure, but you don't have to design and architect that. You can design and architect the customer experience, the build, the ecosystem. You can find your role and figure what you want to do. Take a lot of the work that we're now starting to see around personalized.
Right.
Personalized medicine, personalized healthcare, personalized, virtually any kind of experience that you get. The pivotal technology over there is not compute technology, it's behavioral science, or it's understanding healthcare, it's understanding which model to apply when. So you're looking at a very rapidly changing tech environment. The skill is sitting there somewhere else.
Right.
It's in an adjacency, right? And so I think focusing on tech is kind of a mistake. You have to figure what's core to your success and find the partners in the ecosystem that can scale your compute infrastructure, can give you the right AI platform, can allow you to move from one to the other. Those are problems that have been solved at scale by others that are specialists.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to what Ravi said. It's very interesting. A lot of our clients get very possessive about technology. So, hey, I want to create my own IT shop. I want to be very prescriptive in terms of what I'm going to be using. Technology is changing so fast that you can never be a master in-house.
Yeah.
So that's why if you look at most of the successful startups, they've left the technology problem to somebody else. Focus on the business, focus on the client. That's going to get you money. Technology pretty much is getting commoditized today.
Right.
So that becomes very important to let go and not be unnecessarily hung up by guiding the direction of technology.
The other variation of that is Gaurav's company, right? Because you deliberately chose to be in services model than a product model. And a lot of that, I'm assuming, is because customers are never happy with off-the-shelf products and they always want that additional layer of customizability and experience and all of that. What has been your observation there, Gaurav?
Yeah, so exactly. I mean, so the thing is that there is a fine line between commodity and tools, services, products which are built for my use case.
Right.
And there is no clear answer here. So when we get a customer, we try our level best to provide solutions around something which are off the shelf.
Right.
And we do our level best to see if that their use case can match that. But 9 out of 10 times what I've seen is that it doesn't happen that way. Because normally what they would do is that they would come back with very specific expectations, and most people are not willing to negotiate on those expectations.
Right.
And that is the reason, this services layer starts to make a little bit of sense. I mean, I am a perfect advocate of what Ravi just said in terms of, having that expertise being offloaded to somebody else. It is very difficult. It is very
Correct.
expensive to build that expertise in-house. And, I am a big advocate of offloading it to somebody else's shoulder who has been there and done that at scale. But again, there is still the topmost layer, maybe the customer-facing layer, which still requires a lot of personalization, which still requires a lot of, that attention to detail which your client is looking for. I think we fit in that layer.
Got it.
To
Yeah.
give you another example
Sure.
of something like that, people think that data is not important. It is exceptionally important. But what people have to realize now is that most new businesses are being based not generating data. So data has been a consequence of doing business, right? You and I exchange money, there's a record somewhere. That's a transactional system that's keeping track of data.
Right.
Today, data has become the business. So if you've got 15 years worth of clinical data, you can easily wrap an AI system, put in consultants in front of it, and suddenly you're providing analytics into how you can do clinical trials more efficiently.
But
now
just
that
keeping-
doesn't mean data is not important.
Yeah.
The insight into data is your business.
Correct.
But the fact that data loses its value over time, right? Suddenly you can't have everything sit on a primary tier, it needs to be cheaper. Suddenly things become more important. Suddenly someone creates a new AI platform, you can extract more value out of it. These are hard problems, but these are hard problems that are being solved by others at scale.
Absolutely. And one of the other hard problem really is, and Niraj, maybe I'd love your opinion, right? When you think of scale, there are other two moving parts, which is really talent, which I think has become exceptionally expensive and very difficult to hire, even for larger companies. So think about the entrepreneurs are trying to find maximum value through that ecosystem. And then the second big issue where I think India is maturing a little bit more is in terms of building profitable businesses, right? So when you think of profits on one side, when you think of hiring challenges on the other side, and when you think of this whole narrative of scale, how does all of this work? Is it even possible to have all of these three working for you?
It's interesting, and I probably wouldn't have said this 10 years back. If you're building your business on people, it's not going to create the resiliency that you want, right? So, we believe that a lot of the businesses that are going to scale up for the future have a machine-first approach.
Interesting.
So it's more about the methodology, the automation, the insights, as Ravi rightly mentioned, that you get in the business rather than this obsessive focus on people, right? Because I think talent's at a premium. We've seen this during the pandemic, just the attrition rates in our company and elsewhere in the industry. So you are going to lose key people, right? But is your business encapsulated in a set of values, a set of methodologies, driven by IT, which makes you resilient and shock-proof to carry yourself for the future? So that, I think, becomes very important. And that's where, look at any business today. I think tech is the foundation. I mean, banking is an industry that I follow very closely. It's increasingly becoming difficult to differentiate between banking and IT. You don't really know what the guy does, right? Is he an IT person or is he really a banking person? Same, Ravi, in your case in healthcare, for example. Just the change that is the healthcare professional more a technology person, or is that really a person who's a specialist in that particular field? Now, both are important, but I think increasingly it is the focus on tech and non-linear scaling, which is important.
Niraj, you know what ended up happening about last year? We realized that if you were trying to hire a data scientist, you were probably competing with your HR department.
Yeah.
When did that last happen? Right? So the nature of the kind of talent that is being used in businesses, right, in functions, technology is just being taken for granted. It's like logical thinking.
But how about profitability and scale then? You know, to scale you need to burn a lot. And I was like these startups I've been talking to, they are burning 3 times of their annual revenue today, even in B2B SaaS, which is a little bit more capital efficient than B2C businesses, right? How do you think of scale versus profitability? Because both of those are equally important. And profitability in the last 12 months has become a little bit more important to a lot of investors and the ecosystem around it. So how do you think of scale and profits together in that context?
Me?
Yep.
I think so. At some point, you have to have an understanding of the unit economics of the business you're in. Okay? If that's not going to pan out in your favor, you can go through temporary ups and downs and bumps, right? On
Right.
your path to growth, you can't predict it. And there's enough capital in the market that allows you to weather the ups and downs. Right now, you're in a down. Okay? People are starting to ask that, hey, you know what? If you've been going around this unprofitable path for too long, but if people see the promise in your unit economics and if they see the growth story there, I don't think anyone's going to object. I think many people before us have been speaking, right? This might be a moment of great opportunity if you've really got the right mindset and the right model.
Got it. Gaurav, your views on scale and profitability?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree with him on the unit economics point, which is that if your unit economics are sorted, I think as you scale and if the number is in check, then I think that path is set. Then there is nothing to worry about, provided that number is making sense all throughout the journey.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've got a little bit of a contrary
Sure.
view
I
to
love
this.
contrary views.
And I don't believe that profitability's got too much to do with scale. And I'll give you an example. So Delhi is in the neighborhood. And if you look at any business, any mom and pop shop, and how they started and how they scaled up. Just look at the sweet shops that are around. Look at the panwala that's around, that's now kind of distributing throughout the country. Do you think they were not profitable when they started? What has really mattered is...
But they're lifestyle businesses. They're not scale businesses.
Well, the conversion of lifestyle businesses through ecosystems into collaborative businesses is what tech is helping you to do today, right? I mean, if you think that Amazon is not a lifestyle, I pretty much buy everything on Amazon. Paytm, for example, it's modeled in my behavior today, right? So it's aiding my lifestyle in many ways. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to buy a home, you're buying it through a platform.
Right.
So I think this all modeled into lifestyles, So I believe that, the notion that I got to go after market share and compromise on profitability, I think that needs to change, and tech is really helping you to do that.
Understood.
Yeah,
I know.
one point
Sorry,
on
yeah.
the lifestyle business part, I think one observation that we've had over past few years is that, there is a definite trend of these lifestyle businesses also now starting to adopt technology in order to open new doors which they previously could not see. Let's say somebody started his business 100 years ago. Now the family had obviously no orientation towards technology. Technology did not exist. Now, they are getting their children and grandchildren coming out of fancy colleges, and, they are now trying to make an impact. They know how stuff can be done. And now they're using all of that knowledge into their business. And now that, so to speak, lifestyle business may not be as much lifestyle maybe 10 years from now, because the third generation entrepreneur has figured out a way on how to scale even what we supposedly called a lifestyle business before.
Got it. I know we're running out of time, but maybe last 2 quick questions. And I think, Ravi, you touched upon the economic downtime scenario and all of that. In the current scenario, the down scenario that we're living in right now, would you advise companies to think of scale or extending their runway at the moment? How should they think about that question in today's crisis situation?
It will vary, I think, right? It's guaranteed going to vary. I think it's still very important to understand. If one takeaway from this conversation, right? I think technology is a very interesting business to be in.
Yep.
We are very glad to be in that business. But if you're going to look at where the real value is coming from all of you, and it's going to only accelerate over the next couple of years, it's going to find the intersection where you're able to take a real business problem or a real consumer problem or a real opportunity out there, which is not related to technology, but leverage technology to make a difference.
Right.
Look at what happened with payment systems in the last 2 years in India, right? It's going to be just that simple. So I think you need to find your niche in there. You're not going to get free money, so just understand that's a really good thing if you've got a really good idea.
Right.
Because the people with the flimsy ideas will just not find the money.
Niraj, your views on the timing for scale?
I absolutely agree with Ravi. I think it's nothing is more important than the idea, and nothing is more important than creating barriers to the idea, right? So how is your idea different from anybody else? And how can you do that faster, cheaper, better than anybody else, right? I think that's the most important thing. Ultimately, profit is decided by what the customer is willing to pay for.
Right.
I mean, you can't decide the profit that you're going to earn in your business. So I think that the fact that the customer seeks you out is so important from a scaling perspective. And I think, to your point, Ravi, the idea is what really decides whether the customer is going to take what you have.
Got it. Any final thoughts from you, Gaurav?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, in times of recession, in downturns, I think what I would say is that try to match your scale with expected demand, and just maybe be a little cautious. That's all. There is nothing wrong about the economy, nothing wrong about the business horizon in general. But there is still this one gloomy weather that everybody's seeing as coming in. So there's nothing wrong in being just cautious. Don't go all guns blazing. Just maybe the runway can be extended piece by piece rather than just building everything in one go. So maybe that's what I would think. That's what I would tell founders to do.
I'll just add one small thing
Sure.
to, I think recession is also a great opportunity to sit back and reevaluate your strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, every crisis brings up newer opportunities. I know we are about time, but very quickly across the board, Ravi, starting with you, as these entrepreneurs think of scale, how is NetApp going to support? Quick elevator pitch for the companies.
So what NetApp does is we call ourselves experts in data, specialists in data, because we do data, so you don't have to. And let me be very clear. Your business may be built on data. You don't have to manage that data through its lifestyle. You need to manage the extraction of business value from it.
Got it. Gaurav, your pitch.
Sure. So Squareboat basically does mobile apps, websites, but the two things in mind. First thing is customer delight, and second is engineering scale. Yeah.
I would say we play on the 5 priorities of startups. I call it the A, B, C, D, E of business. So A for automation, B for blockchain, C for cloud, D for data, and E for ecosystem. So you remember us as A, B, C, D, E.
Wonderful. I know we are way above time, but it's been a real good, candid, quick conversation on scaling. I really appreciate all of you sharing your insights very candidly here. And I'm sure entrepreneurs here have taken some good takeaways, and they're going to reach out to you as they expand their scale journey. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being a patient audience. And back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Praveen. Praveen, can you please hand over the gifts? I think it was a great session for people who are trying to figure out whether to build or buy technology. As a health tech company, we always felt that we have to build. But I think there's a way out of getting there faster by just partnering with companies that are offering those services.